Good morning. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us about your nonprofit origin story?
Hi, Tasha. Thank you very much for having me here. So, I'm Sabine Panneau. I'm a fundraising mentor. I started in fundraising 20 years ago as a fundraising officer for the Arts Museum in London, where I just finished university and started in fundraising. And fast forward 20 years later, I'm still a fundraiser. I support fundraisers in their team with mentoring programs, which are between twice or four times a month. We meet for a call, and I support them as they're doing their regular job and they have questions and they need guidance, they need support. Sometimes they need feedback on work that they're working on. So that's what we do.
That's amazing. And you've lived all over the world and you've been fundraising in multiple countries, which I find really interesting because I don't think we have many of our fundraisers that have that worldwide kind of fundraising experience.
Yes, definitely. I'm French originally, so already going to study in university in the UK and working in fundraising in the UK was a cultural experience. I could see it because there's definitely a difference. Fundraising nowadays in France is more common. There's Institute of Fundraising in France and there's a lot of fundraisers, but it wasn't the case. So when I started as a career, as a French person, there was not that many French, even in France, fundraisers. So it was very interesting to see how people give and their relationship with charities in the UK. And it's very strong, and people support their charities that they've known. They build a relationship with fundraisers and donors. And it was really interesting to see that. And over the years, I lived in Spain, and I didn't work as a fundraiser in Spain. At the time, it wasn't something, I wasn't comfortable in Spanish anyway, so I couldn't really do that in Spain. But then I moved to Argentina, where I currently live, and I still work with charities in the UK and charities in the US. So then as well, when 2 years ago, when I went back into fundraising, really discovering how to do fundraising in the US, and which is different from fundraising in the UK. Definitely, there's the way the charities are run. There's a lot of differences, like subtle differences, but at the same time, as a fundraiser, I feel that building relationship with donors is still the same. We still need to be approachable. We still need to build trust with the work that the charity, the cause that is supporting. I always say in fundraising, trust and transparency are the two very important factors. And that even though there's different cultural differences in culture, it's you still need to get those. So that's why I feel there's a lot of differences in different countries, but at the same time, there are human connections, and those are universal.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And even as part of the Nonprofit Hive and watching people build relationships and connections through this community, it's all over the world, people from everywhere. But I think there's just some core parts to just being a human. And when we talk about like transactional relationships and relationships that are just money dependent, those are very different relationships than when we build something that has like a depth to it. And I don't know why sometimes some fundraising 50 years ago became very transactional, and you can see the swing back over now because it's clear the psychology behind that is going to really affect how much nonprofits are able to fundraise if they focus on only transactional.
Definitely. And I see that a lot because I work mainly in major gift fundraising. So it's definitely where the human connection is so important. No, it's different where face-to-face fundraising, or like in the UK, there's a lot of street or like tabling or those other type of fundraising where you have such a short amount of time with the person. Your message has to be so strong so that you touch them in that 30 seconds that you're engaging in that conversation. So that's like different fundraisers working in a major gift, or I've worked a lot of like in donors to a ship, and where there's about building longer relationship with your donors. And I haven't had that experience of being in the street with a bucket, or at the time it was in London. At the time there was so many fundraisers for charities in the streets, and I haven't done that. I don't think I would have been able to do it, because there is more of a transaction. I feel like that's more of a transactional. You give now, there's no take your time to think about it, and we'll catch up on that later on. It's just so quick.
It's so quick. It's so quick. And Yeah, it's maybe a quick win if people do decide to donate, but you're losing something on the other side, potentially with trust, potentially with transparency. Have that person's follow-up information. Can you steward them forward? A lot of different locations. What would you say is your favorite part of working in fundraising?
There's one thing that I often mention when I do the Hive School with other fundraisers, and I love to mix the kind of human side of fundraising, obviously building relationship with people, and using tech. I love CRMs. I'm a very, I would say, a tech person. Because in the middle of my career, I did 15 years working in digital marketing. So using tools and yes, CRM and databases are definitely something that I love to mix, as well as a fundraiser. I love to have that dual skills, which
Yeah.
sometimes can feel that they're two different areas. And for me, I think they're really interesting to be able to use those. And I always say CRM or your database is there to alleviate your work, to make your work easier, not to give you a headache of
Yeah.
what do I do with that information? Where do I put it? How do I segment your list and that kind of things? I think for me, one of my favorite things in as I work now as a fundraiser is really to use both, to be able to have that one-on-one connection with donors, with teams, and as a mentor with fundraisers, but as well using the tools that AI is also a tool that is definitely something that I use, and I recommend people getting started with it because it's something that will, again, not to replace your work, but really to alleviate, to make your work easier, and to get to familiarize yourself with it because it's there. So we
I
may
love
as
that.
well learn about it now.
Yeah, I love that this is your favorite part because I would say for so many people I talk to, data, CRMs are like the least favorite part for many fundraisers because they love the relational part is like the people is they're like, "Oh, I love the people." But you bring up such a good point that it really can strengthen. It can strengthen the work and it can be critical, but I think this ties in so beautifully into some of the challenges because I think what you've described as your favorite thing, why it so often is a challenge for people in nonprofit is because they're not given the time to truly learn how to use the tools, invest in the tools thrown at them, and then they're supposed to somehow magically find time to begin using that tool.
Definitely. And I think I learned about the tools as a because I didn't have the choice. And going back to the context where as an expat or living abroad, I didn't have the human connection with people anymore. Like
Yeah.
in locally, yes, I did. But with a lot of people, it was the computer has been my connection for
Yeah.
work, and tools and digital marketing was my way to connect with people. And CRM, I don't know, it just when I dive into a CRM for a client, and I love when they have lots of information, so you can see that you can see. Now again, going back to donor, major donor, you can really see the relationship how it's evolved. It has evolved over time, and using that tool as a way to be able to connect with them later on and knowing a little bit of their story. And I've learned that from being remote, living from the people that I was connected with for work, not personally, obviously, as I mentioned, in my life, I had a lot of people around, but for work has always been through the connection. So using those tools, I had to learn those. And I understand why some people that didn't have that situation have to learn those now. And it feels very challenging and
Yeah.
very scary.
Yeah, it is. And the overwhelm of how big the work is can absolutely add to our ability or inability
Mm.
to adopt those tools. What other challenges have you seen in your work with nonprofits?
Definitely working with smaller teams, the lack of budget for the team, for the tools for them to support their fundraising campaign. I've had the opportunity to work for a very large charity. I work for Cancer Research UK in the UK, which is the largest medical charity in the world, and with thousands of fundraisers. And it was different. And I worked for smaller charities with a handful of people in the team in the whole charity, and I could see the difference. And I can see definitely now that I work as a mentor, usually solo fundraisers that working directly with the executive director, and they're the only person in their fundraising team, and that the lack of support and, not always finding the training. So I do always recommend people, you have a kind of list of different trainings that they can go and do, and sometimes the cost of it as well, or even attending to conferences, it's not always possible for fundraisers. But it's one of those challenges where I see try to connect. And the Hive is a way as well to connect. You maybe not be able to get funding or budget to go to a course or like a conference, but to be able to connect with people around the world and to learn from their experience. And I have had calls after the Hive with people on kind of, let's catch up on this specific topic. And I remember speaking with someone on LinkedIn about using, and I did a quick call on helping them to how to use LinkedIn for their profile. And that person would have had, if we hadn't met on the Hive, we would not be able to do that. For me, this is a challenge, but there's so many ways and platforms that offer free training. And so it's trying to see, and at the time, you mentioned the time and the overwhelm for fundraisers, it's not always, maybe you want, but you're willing to learn about a new platform, but you don't necessarily have the time because it's hours of practice.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot of time. And I do think that's been one of the very cool things about the Nonprofit Hive is, and I get it on both directions. There are people who very much come into the Hive feeling like they're coming in as the expert in fundraising, marketing, major gifts, like variety of roles that they've played and been in the sector for a long time. And absolutely, they bring an enormous value to all the conversations they're a part of, even if they're just listening to somebody who's newer to the field and they understand exactly what they're talking about. But what's been cool is I've had a couple more senior folks also go, I thought I was going to step in as a mentor, but here was this younger person and they sent me to the following resources I'd never even heard of, because that can happen, right? People newer to their career are getting access or maybe have more technical knowledge than people who are more senior in their career. So I love that the information flows in both directions, and that even though I would go, oh, I'm more of an expert I really enjoy digital marketing. I love like talking LinkedIn. There are so many other things that people start talking about it. I'm just going, I had no idea. It's just, we can't know everything, but it allows us to scale up our knowledge in a more meaningful way when we talk to somebody else who is passionate about those things as well.
Yeah, no, definitely.
You've been a member of the Hive. Over 30 conversations now. I'd have to look at the exact number, but I know it's a lot. You're one of our original members. In terms of peer support and these conversations that you get with others, what have you found really useful in some of your Hive chats?
As you just mentioned, the variety of people that I've met all over the world and in lots of different countries, and they have different size of the charity they work for. They'd be smaller, they'd be a bit bigger. And I think that's what I like in my personal life, the variety, that to be able to meet a lot of people. And that's why as well, like in my life, having lived in different countries, I enjoy meeting people and getting to know their story. And so many times that we see the timer on top and it's like, okay, we've only got the last 5 minutes and we need to wrap up, and we feel like we still have so much to share. And that's just, and it's hardly ever, I think, in all those conversations, like I felt, oh, that's it, I want to finish the call. It's always been, we're looking at the timer and trying to share the last few things we wanted to share with the person. So it's been fun. And as you mentioned as well, like people earlier in their career and people in different stages, and to be able to learn from them and to see, even as always comparing to what we do, comparing ourselves in a way. I was like, okay, I've had some people as well that we felt like, oh, we exactly have the same background. We did this and that. And when we shared, we felt so much in common, and we could be in so many different countries, different situations. But we had something in common that was strong. And that's always fun as well to feel that.
It's super fun for me. It happens at least every week, a couple of times, where I see someone crop up and look at their nonprofit background, especially for brand new people. It's my favorite thing to be able to go, here's a brand new person. They have no knowledge of what the heck this is they've signed up for. They're really, what was this? And to be able to pair them in conversation, particularly with someone more like yourself, who's a little bit more senior. And sometimes these are people who are also very senior in their roles, but to have been able to go, I have someone this week where they've worked at, it's the Humane Society, like the branching parent Humane Society in the US, and to be able to pair them with someone who specializes in animal welfare fundraising, that is so fun. Like that for me is just how can, like the conversations that come out of sometimes what I would call like, there's nonprofit work and then there's the niches within nonprofit work, and being able to put those conversations together, it's just really fun because
Yeah,
it can feel lonely. Even when you're at enormous organizations, you can still really feel often there's some loneliness to the work. So I think it's really nice to be able to pair people in those conversations.
definitely, definitely. And yeah, I've had those kind of conversations where it's not about not being within team with other people. It's not having sometimes as well those common grounds where we meet on, we talk about something that is like we both understand what it is, whereas the other people within their team, they can't really necessarily share those kind of as well, like feelings that,
Yeah.
because sometimes we just talk about office, what's happening in the office and with their colleagues, and they can't always, obviously they can't always share that with their own colleagues.
Yeah.
So it's a way as well to kind of talk about what's happening in their professional life. So yeah, it's a lot of conversations that I've had.
It's amazing. I love it. And yeah, you've been such a regular and such a resource, I know, to this community. It's been amazing. So tell us a little bit more as we wrap up. Tell us a little bit more about your work and how people can get in touch with you.
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, really because of the physical distance, because I'm based in Argentina, being a fundraiser in the team wasn't something that I felt like I could do. Because again, going back to that face to face, it has that moment. 2 years ago, really, I decided that I would focus on being a mentor for fundraisers. So I support them in with at the video calls that we do. So either every week or every 2 weeks, and then in between with email catch up or feedback that I use a lot of the Loom videos where I do short video
Nice.
explaining, going over. They can share with me a strategy or a campaign, like email campaign, or even getting stuck on using something with their CRM. So the mentee that I have, they're usually early career and solo fundraisers that feel lonely in their role and don't have, or the executive director or the CEO is so busy that they can't just go and ask that question that feels like a stupid question that I don't want to bother them, and they can ask me anything. I'm there, I answer all questions. There's no judgment of my part of what the questions that they ask or even where they feel stuck. They know that they can ask me and I support them. And if I don't know the answer, we'll search together. Sometimes on the call, we speak. And sometimes we actually go on a document and then rewrite something or do a search or on fundings, and we can do so many different things. So that's what we do. That's what I do in my mentoring program, and I have a few other kind of one-off services. I mentioned LinkedIn earlier. I do a lot of LinkedIn support of how to use LinkedIn as a fundraiser so that your profile works for you, rather than just being like your CV. It's much more than that. So I had to build relationship as well with potential donors, as well as with a lot of the grant fundraisers, where a lot of the trust and fund, and the grants are now invitation only. And how do you get in if you can't apply for the grants directly? So it's about building relationship with program officers within those trusts and foundations and getting to know them and to be as a long-term building relationship with them, but it's doing the work. So how can you get your LinkedIn profile ready so that when you engage with them, they know exactly, they understand what you do and why you're contacting them, and they don't feel like they don't accept you as a connection. This as well, doing a lot of research using the LinkedIn platform as a tool to search people with. There's a lot of different kind of categories and people don't always use on LinkedIn in the search bar. So just going over those as a kind of one-off service for fundraisers. So
I love that.
yeah, so
That's
that's
fantastic.
mainly one.
I feel like LinkedIn is wildly underutilized by the nonprofit sector, and it's an incredible place to build relationships as a person. And I always like to say it's a great place to not build relationships too, because if someone comes to my profile and everything I'm talking about, how I speak, all of that doesn't appeal to them, that's great, because they won't engage with each other too. And because it's not meant to be. Because and I know I'm way more personal on LinkedIn than many other people would be comfortable to be. And that's also okay. But I do think it's a great space to showcase how you work, what you care about, what your goals are potentially for your organization, where you're aiming. And it just gives a nice digital footprint for the organization you work for, and also for your professional, to showcase professionally what you've been up to.
Exactly. And there's so many, I can't remember the exact number, percentage of LinkedIn users that are never post, that never engage, but they're there, they're watching, they're reading the comments, they're reading the posts, they're watching the videos, but they will never engage. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But if we as a fundraiser or as a charity, we're not visible there, we're missing that connection that they will, as you mentioned, they will make their own idea of what they think about what you do. But if you don't show anything, they won't get any opinion. So
No opinion. Exactly. And people can get in touch with you on LinkedIn. Best way to get in touch with you?
yes,
Okay.
LinkedIn, DM on LinkedIn, or even just connecting with me, adding me as a connection, or following me on LinkedIn. Definitely the best way to.
Amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. And thank you for being one of our longtime members. Appreciate the heck out of you. And I said it earlier, but I love to be able to there's this few folks like yourself where they show up and I know that I can put them in conversation with anyone. And what a blessing, and always lovely feedback about you as a partner in conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And I'll keep showing up on your list every week. Thank you very much, Tasha.